I think this is a critical point in time where we have to get new discoveries done in a more rapid pace than any other time in recent history. And the need for speed is great. And the entire world is looking at its scientists, its doctors, its innovators in trying to get a remedy to this grave situation and to get it now. But there's a limit to how much you can accelerate science. And if there's one person in the world that stands in that specific point where all of the expectations and pressure is pinpointed at, is our next speaker, which is the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Eric Rubin. So, Eric, thank you so much again for taking the time and spending it with us today. You have the privilege to be exposed to the most exciting science out there in near real time, especially at this time. This is something really precious, and the world is struggling to cope with the pandemic. And 6 months into this odyssey, it seems so little was achieved in terms of science as compared to what we could have expected maybe 6 months ago. So at least what I was expecting to see was much greater than what we have right now. So from everything that you've read and seen, could you please provide us with the best nuggets of the new helpful insights how to cope with this emerging challenge?
So among the interesting things that I've seen that we haven't been able to publish are a lot of hypotheticals. Here are things that we should be doing. It's not the kind of thing that we do, but there are still a lot of good ideas out there that are waiting to be tested. I think one of the challenges, and you talked about the pace of a change, one of the challenges is to figure out how to do rigorous testing of ideas in this moving environment. So that's one category. Another is institutional responses. Our hospital, our emergency room, our healthcare system has suffered because of this, and this is what we're doing to deal with it. Here's how we're trying to prevent infection in our clinic. Here's how we are still able to do important cancer surgeries despite the threat of infection for patients and for our staff. And I think those are interesting. They're very interesting experiences. I think people can learn from them. They're not tests, and that's the kind of thing that we publish. But I think that there is a lot of value in people thinking about the epidemic and what kinds of things we can be doing.
I'd like to move on to something that is more specific to your day job, which is how your journal coped with the immense pressure to provide rapid cycle decisions on early stage scientific evidence that has, unprecedented potentially impact on global response to the pandemic. So how did you handle this?
As a doctor, having been on during COVID-19, I can say it was very frustrating early on to not have any guidance whatsoever. And I think we didn't want to be purists about it. We wanted to get information out there that could be useful. And that meant that we have published things that perhaps under ordinary circumstances we wouldn't have, but it's just such an urgent situation that we felt like it was important. And I don't feel badly about that at all. We've moved on, I think, to more to our sweet spot of randomized controlled trials as they're appearing and less experiences and retrospective studies. But I still think we learned quite important information from those studies. Getting back to process, though, we haven't really changed anything. We still get a large number of peer reviews for the most important articles. We still have the same editorial process with a back and forth with the authors. We just have accelerated things tremendously. That means a couple of things. That means that there's a lot of stress on our staff. And there are a lot of late nights and weekends, not just for our editors, but our editorial staff. I'm really proud of the job that they've done. It's really amazing. They've really stepped up in a big way. It means that people have taken on things that are outside of their expertise and had to handle them. It's a huge stress on reviewers because the reviewers we ask are the same people who are taking care of patients and setting policies for their hospitals or their government institutions. And people have been very forthcoming and really stepped up in that respect.
It is possible, even in the way the reviews are currently being structured, is it even possible to do such a rapid cycle and still deal with issues like fraud that are never easy to deal with, but especially now when everything is basically burning?
Fraud is a particular issue. It's an issue all the time. And would we be less susceptible to it if we took more time? I doubt it. The specific incident that you're referring to is the retraction of the data from Surgisphere that we had to do. We don't know if it was fraud, but it certainly was unreliable, unsupported data. At the very least. I think that we got all of our reviews, and after all the review process, after we published, we didn't actually get any letters to the editor that suggested that it was fraudulent until the Lancet study was published several weeks later, and it became clear. It wasn't so clear from what we published and from the data that we had. We're not that set up for fraud, though. I mean, we're susceptible to it. We've published other fraudulent stuff in the past, as has every scientific publication. And there's a level of trust that we have and our peer reviewers have in our authors. So, and I think that we are making changes in response to what happened, but I don't think that it will never happen again. At the time we published that, we also published 2 other articles which drew the same conclusion from independent data sets. And so we think the conclusion was right and that we weren't likely to do harm by publishing it. We have rejected several manuscripts where we think that we felt that the quality wasn't so bad, but it wasn't good enough to make the claim that we'd end up making. So it wasn't really a knock on the study. It was our concern that our publishing it would put this imprimatur that would allow people to use a therapy. So I think in the end, we get to take fewer chances than other journals, but that means we have to be that much more careful.
I think that's what happens when you are the one who's basically setting the standards. But in any way, you have been running business during this event. What are the most proud moments you have to share with us in the way the journal has been running during this event? What would you have done differently now, in perfect hindsight?
What I'm most proud of are people. I think this is really about what individuals do. Our journal is very focused on our editors, our editorial staff, our reviewers being willing to put in the time and be proactive. We go out looking for articles all the time. We solicit, many of the things that you've seen are solicited, not just the studies, but opinion pieces about how to reopen the economy. What is the interaction between racism, which is a very big issue right now in the U.S., and the COVID-19 outbreak? Those sorts of things we have relied on our editors, and then ultimately authors being willing to submit to us. So I think we've done well. That retraction notwithstanding, I think we've published much of the important work in the area, and we've helped make it better, I think, through the editorial process. I think we probably would have moved to some of the systems that we're using now earlier on. We have a more efficient way of screening articles. I'm very sensitive to it because I'm the screener, and when the volume was over 200 a day, it was taking up most of my day just to read through them, all the submissions. Now the both the volume is lower and we've come up with a much more efficient way of getting through all of that. It's still me, but at least it doesn't take clicking on a mouse over and over and over again like it used to. I certainly look forward to the day that we can get back to normal and look back on this to see what the lessons were. Already we've been experimenting with new forms during the pandemic, and I think some of those are going to survive, and I hope that we can get an idea of what works and what doesn't. What I say about our journal, I think, goes for all journals. Everyone has had to innovate, I think, and they've done it in different ways, and I hope that we not only learn from what we've done, but from what our colleagues have done at other journals.